as we enter into the sacred space of listening and receiving, I invite you to join me in this short induction ceremony in order to be fully open, receptive, and aligned with the information that is for your highest good in this conversation today. Begin by closing your eyes and taking a deep breath into the belly. And as you're breathing, bring your awareness into your heart center, making contact with the light in your heart. And find your heart light glowing, growing and expanding out around your chest. And now bring that light of your heart up through your crown center, through the top of the head, extending up all the way above you into central sun, making contact with the heart energy of central sun. And then bring that powerful energy down through the ethers into the crown of your head, down through your body, and into your heart center, expanding and joining with the light in your heart, and continuing down to the base of your spine, extending down all the way down into the center of the earth, making contact with the heart center of Mother Earth. And now bring that nurturing energy up through the layers of the earth, carrying liquid crystal plasma through roots up into the base of your spine, and then spreading into every cell of your body, moving into the heart center, joining with the light from above and joining with the light of your heart, creating a holy trinity of light within you, and then spreading out around you, holding space for your highest good, your highest awakening, and the opening to receive the divine downloads, encodements, activations, and light codes that are perfect for you at this time. Breathe that in deeply into your belly, allowing yourself to expand in this energy and opening to step in to the container of receiving. Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 6. We are exploring expanded states of consciousness. I'm your host, Waxéla Sananda, and today it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dayna Dunbar. Welcome, Dayna.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here. Really excited.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. And this has kind of been a long time coming. So I have been excited about this conversation. And so for starters, I would love to just have you in your own words share a little bit about yourself and your work for anybody that is not familiar with you yet.
Okay, sure. So I am a visionary storyteller and was guided to begin writing after an experience, an encounter experience that I think we're going to talk about, and have 3 novels published. And I'm also, I write other people's stories as well. They're inspiration stories, so memoirs for people who have transformation experiences. And that is my passion. I also am a counselor. I have a master's degree in spiritual psychology, and I do counseling work with people often around their creativity and unblocking their creativity and unblocking whatever's in the unconscious mind in their life that is blocking their fullest potential for awakening and really spiritual awareness is the main goal, because that's what the most important thing is that we're doing here in this world. So yeah, that's the work that I do in the world, and I love it.
Awesome. I love how you have put counseling together with spirituality and awakening, and then brought in creativity and, visionary storytelling, and then just like created this whole world, which really is an expanded state of consciousness. And so I got to read your book, your newest book, called Awake, here for people that, let's see if people can see it there. It's pretty sizable, and I am not a fast reader. I'm not a speed reader, but I will tell you, I got through this in a couple of days, which is amazing for me because, we're all busy people, but I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. It was easy to read. It was, it was just like engaging. There was a lot of spirituality. And something I really loved about it is I have such strong connections to the Mayan ruins in the Yucatan. I've been to, I think, almost every place that was mentioned in the book. And so I felt really connected to the story. And then, of course, there's a lot of galactic consciousness. I won't say any spoilers, but it felt like this fun adventure that I got to go on with the characters in the book. And I know that this story that you wrote was inspired by your own personal experience. So I would love to have you share about the experience you had that inspired this book.
Yeah, I would love to to share it. It's very much a sacred story, and it feels like such an honor to be able to share it, because for the longest time, until very recently, until this book came out, I didn't share it with anybody except very, very close friends and family. So it's kind of amazing to be able to share it now. So it was in the summer of 1994, and I was camping in Sedona, Arizona, shockingly, with my girlfriend at the time. And we were just started dating, and we decided to go to Sedona camping, and we were directed by a friend of mine to a site that was 3 miles up Schnebly Hill Road. If anybody knows Sedona, it's a very rutted out dirt road. You go 3 miles past the cattle guard and park on the side of the road, and then walk up through some brush, and there's a mesa, Red Rock Mesa up there, and there was nobody up there at the time. Now you can't barely even get up there. It's a very busy road with Jeeps and stuff, and there's no camping and certainly no fires. But we, at the time, it was this magical moment where we were able to go up there and pitch our tents, and there was already a beautiful medicine wheel on the property, on that site, and we were just alone, and surrounded by 360-degree, red rock spires, and just the celestial realm above. It was truly magical. And for a couple of days, we just really steeped in nature and just came into the presence. And there was a lot of love that we shared between us as well. And one day, like the third day, we went into town and went to a new age bookstore, which you do in Sedona. And we saw on the board at the front that there was a meditation about to happen, and it was hot. So we were like, let's do the meditation. Went into this beautiful meditation room, and a man named Richard Danley came in. Didn't know who he was, but after we found out that he had written the book about Sedona UFO encounters, and he led this meditation that was so beautiful. And at the end, he said, "We are now calling a mothership to come and hover over the building." And Chris and I were, spiritual at the time. I was in my 20s. We both were. And so, but that was, for us, definitely past the norm of anything that we were used to. And so we looked at each other, we were like, oh my gosh, this is so Sedona, and we bought his book, but it was more like a souvenir than anything, and went back to the campsite and just were called that night to go into the medicine wheel. And just Chris was like, let's do a dance. And so we started dancing, put on this beautiful music, and we're kind of calling down the galactic energies and just pulling them down from the heavens to the earth. And it was just a gorgeous experience. And then we went back to the campfire, and had dinner. And then at one point I just looked up, and it was in the constellation Scorpio, which was off to our left, kind of on the horizon. And I thought it was a star in the constellation, but it started moving, and it started to move away like this in a swimming in motion. And I, was like, like this. And I said, oh my God, it's moving. And Chris looked at it and she said, it is. And something in me, I guess the combination of everything that had happened during the day, it was just such and being so present was was guided. And I said, if you want to communicate with us, we're here. I was just guided to say that. And instantly that light started to come back and toward us. And at that point I was like kind of freaking out, and there was fear mixed in with just this incredible excitement. And I said, they want to talk to you, to Chris, because she had one time had been able to do astral traveling. And so I thought I guess I was having some self-doubt about my own kind of spiritual maturity. And I said, they want to talk to you. And so they came, the ship came back and came right in front of us. And it was a spinning light. It was just light though. We couldn't see any kind of like material that it was made of or anything. It was kind of an orange hue, and it was spinning. And then all of a sudden, and it seemed like they just appeared like that, these two other ones came in, and they were almost like sentries, and they were further away. And then the big one was right in the middle. So it was like a triangle of ships. And I said, they want to talk to you. And so Chris actually went out she was guided to go out into the medicine wheel, and she laid down in the medicine wheel. That's how she normally meditates, is lying down. So she laid down in the medicine wheel, and immediately I saw a light come out of her body and go up to the ship and then come back down. And it was like this circle I was connecting. And I was just like, I looked at the ship and I said, you be good to her. Because I knew it was like pulling her in her energy body. I mean, I could only assume that that's what was happening because her body didn't go, but its energy was coming out of her, very strong energy field that I could see. And I said, you be good to her. And I heard a voice, a female voice, and it said, don't worry, we will. And and I went, oh my God, because I recognized the voice. And I said, Kaya, is that you? And she said, yes, it is. Well, for the previous 6 months, I had been in meditation, having a energy come to me. And I'd never had anything like this happen before. I'm not like you, where it's just accessible from, birth or whatever. It was not like that. And so this was very new for me. And every time I would close my eyes in meditation, she would just be right there in front of me, and I could feel her. And she told me her name was Kaya. There was almost no communication verbally, but it was just so much love. She would just be in such love and so happy, like joyful to be in my presence. And she said her name was Kaya. And I told a few friends, I was like, I'm having this wild experience where this being is coming to me in meditation. I don't know what's going on. It's so strong. And so that happened for 6 months prior to this. And that's the voice that I heard from the ship. And looking back on it afterwards, I thought, I really feel like she was preparing me for this experience. Because there's no time to them, so I felt like she was building me to be able to handle this experience. So she said, yes, it is. And we started to have a telepathic communication and of course I said, why are you here? Where are you from? And she said they were from the Pleiades constellation, and that she said that they were here because Earth is in a major transition. And it felt like, kind of like she's saying, you know, this is the hot spot in the universe right now, that this is the most entertaining possible place to be. And they were not only observing what was going to happen if we were going to ascend, or if we're going to, you know, basically destroy ourselves, but also they're holding the energy for us to be able to make it out of this period that we're in. And then it was just you know, sitting in, again, it was just more sitting in this loving light energy, and just beautiful. And then at some point I saw the light disappear, and Chris, you know, from the ship with Chris, and she stood up and came back over and told me what she experienced. And she when she went to the ship in her light body, she met a male, and we think that he was probably in some kind of a suit that what made it where she could handle being in his presence, because he didn't have any facial features or any hair. It was almost like he had something covering his head, and then he had 3 fingers, and he was very tall. And but the love coming off of him, it was very similar to what I experienced with Kaya. And they were in a kind of an observation room, like a little auditorium, amphitheater type of thing. And down at the bottom was a stage, kind of with the table on it, a kind of an observation platform. And he took her hand and he started to walk her down toward that platform, and she got scared because of the, you know, abduction kinds of stories that are out there. And he picked up on that, and he said, we don't have to go down there if you don't want to. And she said, no, I'd rather not. And so they sat on the stairs and had basically the same kind of experience that I had with Kaya. And she said she'd never felt anything like that in her life, as far as the love and the just profound energy from him. And it was life-changing for her as well. And then when she finished telling me her story, I said, well, I was kind of in the middle of a conversation. I told her about Kaya, and I was in the middle of a conversation. I'd like to finish it. And I wanted to go to the ship. So I went out into the medicine wheel, and I sat down, crossed my legs into you know, my meditation position. And I looked up at the ship and I said, okay, I'm ready. And Kaya said, I could feel her saying kind of like, hold on a moment, and then conferring with others. And she came back to me and she said, you can't come up. And I said, why not? She got to. And she said, you energetically, you are not prepared for that, and it would be too much for you. And so you can't come here. And I said, oh, I was so disappointed for a moment. And then I said, well, can you come here? And she said, yes, I can. And so so I closed my eyes, because that's how I'd always been with her, you know, her energy. I closed my eyes, and immediately I felt her presence in front of me. And it was much stronger than it had ever been. And then I realized that I could open my eyes and she was there. And so I opened my eyes and I could see this outline of her face. It was like on this side of her face, just her face like this, and her neck and her shoulder. She was very long and lean, no hair, and really beautiful. But it was like a filament, you know, of light on this side of her face. So I couldn't see her very well. And then just one of the coolest things happened. It just took my breath away. The fire was still going, and the smoke from the fire. And somebody just suggested that maybe she sent the smoke her way at that moment. But the smoke from the fire blew over her form. And you know, when you hold a flashlight up into smoke and you can see the beam of light, I could completely see the smoke filled out her features. And I could see her, and I just was like this. It was just, you know, just this incredible being, very lean face, and lean and long arms and everything, but anthropomorphic for sure. And then she wanted to touch me. She's just like this love. It was so powerful. It was like as if I would see kind of like a baby snow leopard walk out of the woods, and I would just be like, like, oh my God, that's how it was. It was just like, that was the most exquisite thing she had ever, experienced. And she wanted to touch me. So she reached out and she touched me like right here with her hand, her energy body. And her hand went into my body. And immediately my energy went like this, like this. And I was like, you can't touch me. It was like way too much for me. And she pulled away and she was like, oh, I could tell she was disappointed, because she really felt like she wanted to just hold me. And so I, looking back on it, I was like, oh my gosh, if I had gone to the ship, I couldn't even handle her touching me at that time in my life, with the vibration that I was at. I can't even imagine what would have happened. So she pulled her hand away, and then we just sat in kind of this incredible communion for, I don't even know how long. And then finally, at some point, I said, I guess I should go back to Chris. And she said, yes, you should. And she was gone. And then I went back to Chris, and they just stayed for hours and kind of did these light displays where it was like they would pop in and pop out, and just like impossible things, according to the laws of physics. They were just, it was like total quantum access to, time and space meant nothing. And so we watched them for hours and finally went to bed at like 2:00 in the morning. And then the next day, went to this magical place in Sedona and wrote the whole thing out, journaled everything about it. And that's when I got the guidance, that very strong guidance from Kaya, that I would be writing about this one day, but it was going to be in the form of a sci-fi adventure that would be able to reach a mainstream audience, not just a spiritual audience, but could pull people in who were not really necessarily on a spiritual path yet, but were curious, and who might never read a nonfiction book about spirituality, but would read a fun story. And so it took me 20 years of learning to really teaching myself to write, because I hadn't started writing at that point, and getting published by Random House before, and then my spiritual growth, huge spiritual growth. It took me to write about an awakened civilization, which is what the book is about. So yeah, so that's my story with Kaya.
Wow, such a cool story. So just out of curiosity, did you continue interacting with Kaya after that event?
Yeah, not really. She's been around, and certainly now, since I started writing the book, she's definitely been the guide for it, for sure. And she's around more now, but not like, I would love her to be, my best friend and whatever, but she has not really been that present for me in that way. And actually, for about a year after that experience, I was so ungrounded. I didn't know how to integrate this at all, and so again, I was grateful that she knew how much I could handle and how much I couldn't. But yeah, since then, it's not been like, I would love to have a lot more access to her, but I have had recently some experiences, and it kind of one that really blew my mind, because it was very, very strong. In a deep meditation one day, she came to me, and very powerfully, and it came to me that she is me in the future, like a way distant future self. And there's no time, but a much more advanced self. So that was a huge revelation, and that was only a few months ago that came through. I'm not even sure. It was like, oh, is that possible? But I think that's such incredible love. She's just loving. They're so loving, these beings. But I think that it's like, it's okay. You're where you are now, but you're not going to be there forever. In this, there is a realm of ascension that is so beautiful, and hang in, because you're so important to where we're going, and what you're doing right now. and what you're doing on the planet. The whole planet's ascension is so important. So I think it's incredibly, there's so much encouragement that we're getting from these beings right now. So many different beings, you know, because we need it. What we're going through right now, we really need it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, that you're, I guess, a higher or more evolved, higher dimensional aspect of yourself would come back to deliver sort of this message and mission and be a guide to you. And of course, that would also explain that deep connection and that instant sort of understanding of each other and the love. So I completely understand that. I love that. And I also wanted to ask about Chris. How was she impacted, and how did she integrate that experience that she had in the ship? And what was that like for her?
Yeah. Well, she was changed deeply. We both were. I mean, it just blew us, our minds open to levels of reality that we didn't know existed. And so it deepened her spirituality in a huge way. It put her on a very dedicated path rather than a dabbling path. And she really has explored a lot of more with astral travel and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, she's always wanted to write about it too, but she never did. And so when I actually finally came out with this book, she was like, oh my God, you did it. I can't believe you really did it. She was so proud of me and so grateful that our story was getting out there and getting, you know, being an inspiration for people. And so, yeah, but it really changed her personally. But she hasn't, she wishes she had done something with it and always thought she would, but she never did. So I felt like a kind of responsibility for both of us in a way.
Yeah, and you know, she still will. And so, you know, I know that one of the things that you're really passionate about is this time, the ascension, the new earth, you know, the awakening of humanity. Do you want to share a little bit about what you see happening, and also what you feel needs to happen for humanity right now?
Yeah, I'd love to. So in the book, in the novel, we write about this awakened civilization that's inspired by Kaya and the beings that came to us. And this is my co-author and I, Julia. And on this planet, it's 1,000 years before the book starts, the novel story starts, they were going through the ravaging era, what they call the ravaging era. And that's what we're going through now. So, and on the planet, they really go very far with it. I'm hoping we don't have to go as far with it as they did, because it really, they lost almost everybody. They were on the brink of extinction. And certain beings who began to awaken to the truth of the true nature and the oneness of all being, left the madness and started to go into what they call vital zones, and started to do practices that are awakening practices, healing trauma practices from what they've been through. And then a certain number of them reached awakening such that it created a tipping point in consciousness across the planet, and the whole planet and everyone across the planet awakened. And then everybody who was born after that was awake. So that is kind of the vision for us. We're in this era right now that is so divisive and what Ken Wilber calls pluralistic, where each person is kind of, they're feeling like this individual who has rights, which is important. It's like, okay, we all have rights. We're seeing, awakening to racism, to the Me Too movement, these kinds of things. It's important that we're coming out of these deeply conditioned ways of being that separate us, and that is happening. And then there are forces that are trying to keep us in that and wanting to keep the status quo, but they're, it's not, and we're seeing things kind of reverse and seemingly go backwards in a lot of ways, but really it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So we have to be confident and strong and in this process. And for me, the way to do that, the most profound thing that we can do in order to help this awakening is forgiveness, is seeing the world as innocent, seeing ourselves as innocent, and seeing others as innocent, completely innocent, despite appearances. It's just making a decision to not have guilt within ourselves or see guilt in others, because guilt is the ego's favorite and most sticky way of keeping us asleep. And so if we have a vision of the world as absolutely innocent, in the Course in Miracles, it says it's a forgiven world, then that vibration that we carry, which Jesus carried, the Buddha carried, they saw that the world is an illusion. The sense of separation, that we're all separate beings, is an illusion. And if you think of Jesus, like the opening, him and the open heart, the forgiveness, his main message was about forgiveness, innocence, accepting everyone, even the sinners. So that is kind of that's the path, that's the bridge. Forgiveness is the bridge. So, and it's not saying condoning anything, it's just knowing that everything that's happened is based on separation, is an illusion. It didn't really happen, because there's only one presence. So anything that seems separate, seems like perpetrator and victim, seems like dark and light, seems like bad and good, is completely just a dream. It's just a dream that we've been dreaming, and we've been asleep. And so now this is the awakening, and the path to awakening is forgiveness. And if we can stand strong in that, and that is a really a devoted, dedicated practice that is really, really challenging, because this all seems so realistic. All of the turmoil and everything, it's such a realistic, 3-dimensional, immersive dream, but we don't have to buy into it. We don't have to keep buying into it. So yeah, it's really clearing our own unconscious mind of guilt and shame, and inflicting guilt and shame on others. I think with that, we are going to ascend into another experience, that we're a happy dream. We're still, but it's a happy dream. And then hopefully there will be a tipping point, like in the novel. And with that tipping point, so it's not, we don't have to reach 51% majority, people who know the truth and are holding in this vision. It's a smaller percent. There are people who theorize that it somewhere between 1 and 10% is all that needs to happen in order for there to be enough of a vibrational shift in order for everyone to start seeing it. And you can see it everywhere. It's like a flowering of consciousness. I mean, my gosh, you talk to people who 10 years ago they'd never be open to things. And then it's like, oh yeah, I just got a tarot reading, or I just went to a medium and talked to my dead aunts or whatever. And you're like, what? I mean, my cousins in Oklahoma are talking, and I'm like, and these, like, how is this? It's like, what? This is amazing. So yeah, I think we're on the right path. And I'm hoping that the novel can be part of that. I think movies like The Matrix, I think stories are so important. Avatar, other movies, other stories in our consciousness, to see a different vision of the earth and the negative storytelling that we're seeing so much of. I think that's really essential as well.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the tipping point. And I'm seeing that too. It feels like of course, it's the world I work in, bringing consciousness and featuring consciousness leaders. but it just seems like everywhere I look and all of the circles that I'm in and everywhere I go, people are ascending their consciousness, their awareness, they're becoming more and more service to other and really wanting to stand for a better world and create that vision together, create the new story together. And so I see that, and I feel like the purpose of things like, of course, your writing, your book, and this show is to help create pathways for people to get on that bridge. And as I would say, especially people that are struggling or maybe don't have the support system around them to hear that in their day-to-day conversations, to just know that it is happening and there are lots and lots and lots of people waking up, and the consciousness is shifting up, the ascension is happening, and it feels really good.
Yeah, it does. It's really powerful, and it's a disruptor. This is what we're experiencing. It's such an energy of disruption of what's going on. So it can feel like everything's destabilized from it. Because we talk about that tipping point in science. There's a lot of examples of these tipping points or phase transitions. One of them that's beautiful is the transition from water to steam. Where, in order for water to turn into something lighter and much more, and ascend basically, and be this completely seemingly different substance, and lighter and more free substance of steam, the water has to boil first. There has to be this, this disruption, this turmoil, this heat that's added to the water in order for that transition to happen. So that moment, that heat, that when it's just about to boil, can feel like, and that's where we are. We're right at that place where everything's coming to a boil. And so we just have to hang in and do our practices, go within, connect to the silence, connect to the truth and that inherent innocence that we are. And that's going to take us through. And then we're going to experience something completely different than what we are now. It's people like you can really imagine it and hold it, which is such a beautiful thing that you're doing. I have access to, I have a vision of it. You have access to realms that I'm like, wow, and so I really appreciate your teachings and what you bring to it, because you're kind of holding the level of this ascension way up here. I'm trying to get to the masses, it's like I'm really with the novel. I mean, that's what the guidance was, is like, get to people who would never open a book that about ascension. They would, it's just like, oh no, but they're curious. They're just curious enough, because that's where I was an atheist. And then I saw, by the grace of God, I saw the miniseries Out on a Limb with Shirley MacLaine.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I was like, oh, wow. And then I got very ill. So I was very open to something different too. It was like these contrast experiences that push you, that boiling, the heat in your life. It's like, but that vision that she put out there in the 80s on national TV, it was like, I just watched it recently, it's free on YouTube, it was just like mind-blowing. So stories can open us in a way that, we love stories as human beings. So that's the guidance I got, was reach young people, especially now, who are so struggling so much and going through things we can't even imagine. And so we really writing it for people to have some spiritual entertainment, but then also for people who just to open that door. Another big story for me was like The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, The Celestine Prophecy, and The Alchemist. But all those are from the 90s, the early 90s. We haven't had a breakthrough visionary novel in since then. And I'm like, what is this? So we want to open the door for other others to be able to write in this genre as well, because the publishing industry does not acknowledge it as an actual genre. We're hoping this whole genre can just blow open and we can have some beautiful storytelling and restore story to like this mythic visionary place that it's always been, like in tribal cultures. It's been hijacked by a lot of darkness, and a lot of vision of humanity is really shitty.
Well, I have the luxury of getting to interview a lot of writers. Pretty much almost everybody that comes on my show has written one or more books, and granted, most of them are not novels, like not what you've done, but I know that there is a lot of powerful spiritual writing going on, which is really fun to see and get to read and be a part of. And I know exactly what you're talking about in the, that whole era. I got to go to, I don't know if it was called a Whole Life Expo or something like that back during the time where Dan Millman was there, Barbara Marciniak, the writer of Celestine Prophecy, blanking on his name right now.
James Redfield.
Yes, James Redfield. And like so many. I think even Ken Wilber was there. I mean, I couldn't go to everything because they're all happening at the same time. There was so many powerhouses there, and it was just amazing. And I was just telling my daughter about that the other day. I'm like, back in the day, and she's read, all those books now because she's open to it. So it's really fun to remember that and feel like, okay, let's do that. Let's have a resurgence of all of that. And I do feel like conscious media is breaking through. It's coming. I have talked to so many people recently that are all about like, let's get this mainstream. Let's bring consciousness to, the theaters and the writing and the television so that people have that option.
Yeah. I mean, it's just shocking to me how little there is out there now and how much is possible. Like just the biopics, I mean, what about a biopic of Amma, or, I mean, there's so many, like we see these biopics of all these rock stars and whatever who, they drink themselves to death. It's always the same story, it seems. But, think of just these amazing biopics of these incredible spiritual journeys. I mean, and not even in Ram Dass, like, can you imagine like just this Ram Dass's life? He's had such an amazing life. It'd be so cool. So yeah, it's just unlimited. And I think, I really think it's part of what needs to happen in order for us to wake up, because it just reaches people in their heart space so often. Yeah. Story, it captures our imagination. Star Wars, these big epic, that's why this, I feel like I was guided to write this big epic sci-fi adventure, because it's like these franchises that, really spark the imagination and take us into like, oh, I never even thought that was possible. And then, it's like, oh yeah, this is possible. Use the force, Yep. So yeah, it's, so we're hoping to write a prequel to the novel and then a sequel to it. So that would be a trilogy.
Yes, I totally see that. I love it. And then maybe we'll get it on the big screen or something at some point, right?
Everybody says that. It's like, it has to be a movie. People see it such as a movie. So
yeah, it would be really fun.
Yeah, it'd be a really fun movie. Yeah.
Well, we are getting to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure people know you have some really fun offerings. The first one is a free gift that is a PDF of the true story of your extraterrestrial encounter, including pictures. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so we kind of curated some pictures of of Sedona, and I didn't have a lot of pictures from that time, but definitely brought in some pictures that are representational of the ships, of the place where we were, and some really beautiful spiritual art are included. And then the story goes even more into specifics than I went into today. So yeah, I really sat down and wrote it in kind of that numinous space and just allowed it to come through. And I think the presentation is really beautiful.
Ah, wonderful. That's incredible. And so everybody watching and listening, I will have that in the show notes. And Dayna, thank you so much for all that you shared with us today. I've really enjoyed having you on.
Thank you, Waxela. This is amazing. Thank you for your summit and everything that you're doing and the energy that you're holding in the world. It's really amazing. It's been incredible to work with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks for all you do. And thank you to all of our watchers and listeners. I love you and appreciate you. Namaste.